So far, with most of Congress's coronavirus relief efforts, there have been some hidden benefits for America's wealthiest, including congressional officials profiting off of coronavirus in the stock market and $500 billion in tax cuts.
Now, new reporting shows that a provision slipped into the CARES Act overwhelmingly benefits millionaires and will cost taxpayers $90 billion in 2020 alone. We're joined via Skype now by the Washington Post economics reporter Jeffrey Stein for more on that. Jeffrey, thank you so much for being with us.
Good to see you, Jeffrey.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've been following your reporting really closely, so we're excited to have you on the show. Just lay out this particular provision, what you were able to find here.
Sure. Obviously, the massive $2 trillion bill passed by Congress had a number of huge measures that got a lot of attention. $1,200 checks for almost every American under $75,000 a year in income, unemployment benefits, trillions in loans for small businesses and corporations. So a lot of the provisions, especially the tax cut provisions, flew under the radar. And one of them that flew under the radar is a change to what businesses can carry back in losses. And essentially that means that businesses who will take huge losses this year can use those losses to offset their tax deduction and their tax obligation in other years in other forms of payments. And in this case, it means that they can use these losses from this year to offset payments that they would have had on capital gains and other sources of income, even from previous years. And that is really a benefit for a very narrow slice of extremely rich people. The Joint Committee on Taxation, which is Congress's nonpartisan body that studies these issues, came up with a study that we got that showed 83% of the benefits of this change go to those earning more than $1 million a year. And so while there's been so much attention on all of these other provisions, quietly Congress snuck a ton of tax measures, many of which are really aimed at helping the wealthy, into this package that basically everyone had to vote for, or they were going to deny unemployment benefits and the $1,200 checks and small business loans. So really, the term is Christmas tree in D.C., and it came quite early this year. And I'm sure there's still more things that we haven't even learned about yet that people are still going through the text and finding what else is in here that will benefit some special interest or certain constituency.
Right. I mean, Jeffrey, you've been excellent covering this from the very beginning. And one thing I also want to focus on with you is right now, as we speak, the Paycheck Protection Program has literally run out of money. What are the status of the negotiations here at this point? And how is it that Congress can be dragging its feet for so long, really, in this effort, while businesses don't have, they literally don't have capital and are desperately trying to get it?
Yeah, it's been clear, from the beginning of this legislation that money would not be enough for small businesses across the country. People tried saying, we need more money. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the provisions that were included, especially, in European countries, have an open-ended funding commitment. And our Congress instead said we're going to set a set amount for the small business loans, when the scale of the economic devastation very, very quickly, within a matter of, I think, 1 or 2 weeks, overwhelmed their capacity. Right now, you're right, there's a ton of bipartisan push, primarily led by Republicans, I guess, at this point, to increase the amount of money in the small business loan program through the Senate. Democrats are saying this may be our only chance, essentially, to use this leverage to push other provisions that they say are absolutely critical for fighting coronavirus, in particular, money for hospitals, money for states that are dealing with both an astonishing decline in tax revenue and a huge increase in service demand, thousands more people, millions more people seeking Medicaid benefits. Democrats are saying if we're going to help the small businesses of this country, let's make sure we also ensure that the hospitals in the states have enough money they need to get through this period. Republicans are saying, no, let's just do the small business thing right away. We have an emergency. Let's do that right now. And they also say that the hospital fund that Congress already approved is not running out yet. So they think, Democrats are really playing politics with this, holding up the money to get other sort of unrelated concessions is how they would put it. But so far, Schumer and Pelosi have, I think to a lot of people's surprise, held pretty firm on this and said, we're not budging on this until you guys agree to plus up money for hospitals and states. So we'll see how that plays out, this and next week.
And how much leverage do they actually have? Because Mitch McConnell originally was saying, we're not doing there is no other phase. This is it. So does he even care to do any of it? I mean, are Republicans really, really anxious to get the rest of this small business money? How strong of a hand do you think Democrats have?
I think one of the kind of odd things about this is it's so personality driven. I think like you read a history book and you just sort of assume that like macro forces, tectonic shifts in like the way societies are form the response to these things. And oddly, like right now, it really seems to me that it's very, very dependent on the individual figure who is in the room. And that's a very abstract remark, but to me, what's going on right now is that Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, who is the point person for bipartisan negotiations on Capitol Hill, he is the member of the Trump administration most able to work with Democrats, who is most responsible for forging not just bipartisan bills in response to the coronavirus crisis, but bipartisan bills in the last 3 years, really, at least since Democrats have taken back the House. And Mnuchin right now is completely overwhelmed with implementing the first major bill passed by Congress. And it's kind of stunning when you talk to people who are close to Treasury, who are in Treasury. The guy has a list of stuff to do every day that is staggering. And because he's so busy dealing with the IMF, dealing with the Fed, dealing with the World Bank, dealing with the $1,200 stimulus checks, helping with the unemployment benefits, he does not have the bandwidth to cut a negotiation with Democrats right now. And it's giving McConnell and Republicans the room to say, we just need to pass the small business fund or else. When Mnuchin gets a little bit of breathing room, maybe next couple of days, maybe some of the issues with the $1,200 payments get worked out a little bit, he may have more time to step in and say, let's just give them the money in the hospitals, and then we can go ahead with the small business additions. So I know it's kind of a weak answer, but really look to see if Mnuchin has the time to cut a deal with Democrats. That could be the crucial factor here.
No, that's very, very interesting political dynamic, and it just goes to, as you said, people think that it's all about macro forces. It actually comes down to much more like the guy literally doesn't have enough time, and it can affect the jobs of millions of Americans. So, Jeffrey, just tell us a little bit about, what are the battle lines kind of shaping up for when Congress comes back on May 4th? Let's assume something happens with the Paycheck Protection Program. What's next for Congress? And as an economics reporter, what are the gaping holes in the economy right now which aren't even having any attention paid to them whatsoever? What do you think?
I think the issue that Congress is sort of staggering that it has not addressed yet is the issue of hazard pay for frontline workers. There was this very heated debate before the last legislation passed where there was a huge increase in unemployment benefits, an additional amount every week, $600 every week. And Republicans said, we're not passing, this is outrageous because people who, work at grocery stores will soon be making more if they're unemployed. And Democrats said, no, nobody wants to go on unemployment. You would have to do something to be terminated. The unemployment only lasts 4 months. And so that debate ended up getting settled, and Republicans went along with a huge increase in unemployment benefits. But it really has raised this question of, if you are a nurse on the front lines making minimum wage, if you're a doctor even in some cases who has huge student debt burdens, if you're a delivery driver, you could be making in some cases more money on unemployment than risking your life to keep the economy going. And then of course, that's just a real equity question. Like, what are we going to do for the people who are putting their lives on the line to allow this to continue, to allow our country to survive? And so I think that's going to be one of the most important issues that Congress will have to address. Another thing that I'm just hearing rumblings of recently is that the insurance companies are at risk of failing. This is, you look at just the absolute devastation this has caused. Millions of businesses across the country have faced a once-in-a-lifetime devastating situation, and they're flooding their insurance companies for help. And one of the things that I'm starting to hear about is maybe Congress is going to step in and bail out these major insurance companies. I think the politics of that would be extremely difficult.
Right. Totally makes sense, Jeffrey.
The point of insurance, if it doesn't cover, a disaster. But on the other hand, these insurance companies don't really price in a global pandemic that shuts down the entire.
Right, certainly.
Yeah. Well, we've really relied on your reporting here. We're really grateful for the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for taking some time out for us today.
Hey, appreciate it.
Thank you guys for bringing in additional perspectives and ideologies. We don't get enough of that in DC, and a big fan of everything you guys are doing as well.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We really appreciate that.
See you later. Next on Rising, Elizabeth Warren's refusal to endorse Bernie Sanders had angered some progressives, but did it bolster her chances of being vice president? Political reporter for Daily Beast, Hannah Trudeau, she talks about Biden's VP stakes, the possibility of a Warren-Biden ticket when Rising continues.